Welcome back, folks. In the last lecture, we had seen what is database and how to create a database and what actions we can perform on a database. In this lecture, we will try to understand what is table and how to create. Okay, so what is table then? Tables are database objects that contain all data in a database. Each row represents a unique record and each column represents a field in a record. A single entry in a table is known as tuple or record or a row. A table consists of several records which is stored in as in a row. Each record can be broken down into several smaller parts of data known as attributes. Let's see an example. If you see this, you will get to know that we have a table which consists of ID, name, age, salary. Okay, in this case, each of this row is known as tuple, and each of this column which store a particular kind of data is known as an attribute. Suppose ID can store only the numbers which is of type int, which is of the similar kind. So this is known as attribute, and each of this row is known as tuple. So this, if you can see, so each of this is known as tuple, and which stores this data, right, of a same type is known as attribute. So moving ahead, let's understand what is primary key. Primary key is a constraint which enforces a unique identity for every row in a column in a database table. So which means that each of the row, if you want to identify each of the row, a unique key will be there. Using that, you can identify that particular row. Let's see an example. So before that, let's try to understand what is foreign key. A foreign key is a constraint that enforces referential integrity in SQL Server database. Okay, so let's understand it through an example. So if you see here, we have employee ID, name, gender, as well as email address. This is one table which consists of the information saying that Adam is a person, and then male, and then all his details is stored. Right. Suppose you want to, you have lot of records. Okay, this is for an example, we have taken only two records, but in real time it can consist of thousands and hundreds and thousands of lakhs of records. Okay, in that case you have to have a separate key to identify that particular row. Suppose let's take an example. In your school or in your college, along with your name you will be having a roll number, right? So, along with your name, why do you have a roll number? Suppose, say, your name is something like Harish, and the Harish is another Harish is there. Okay, the initial might be a kind of difference, but still the roll number will be provided for you to identify your uniquely, your name uniquely. So, that is the reason we are using this primary key. Okay, let's see an example of foreign key. Okay, so if you see here, we have employee ID, which is same as the employee ID which we have here. Consider this as an employee table and this as an salary table, employee salary table. So which stores the salary of each of the employee. In this case, we are referencing the just the IDs we are referencing. So this concept is known as foreign key, where it states that a foreign key is a constraint that enforces referential integrity. Okay, so this is how we will refer. The ID whichever is present in the employee table is also present in the salary table. So we are just referencing it. So this concept is known as foreign key. Let's create a table. So there are two ways that we can create a table. Okay, so one is through query and another one is through this right clicking on this tables. So if you expand your database, and you can see the folder named as tables. You can see some system tables and all. We are not interested in that. We will create our own table. Right click on this and then click on table. Okay, you will get this grid view. uh, Now let's try to enter some column names. Let's say employee table we are creating, and the data type is of type int. Okay, and this column, this checkbox is just to enforce null or not null. So now we don't want this to be null column, so we will uncheck this. And next is employee name. Say employee name is of the type varchar. Okay, so also we will uncheck this. Now let's try to create a column which takes an input of gender. So let's say this is of type varchar. Okay, we will uncheck this. So once we create this, let's save it. Okay, so let's say this as employee 1 or emp table. Okay, and just right click on this. Yeah, now it successfully got saved. Just refresh this to see that. Yeah, do you see that? Yeah. So this is one way of creating. So once you expand this, you can see this, all these columns. So which says that employee ID, employee name and gender. Suppose if you want to enforce this as a primary key constraint, so then right click on this and then set as a primary key. So which will identify this particular table uniquely through this column. Okay. Now suppose say you want to insert the row into this table. So then right click on the table and click on edit top 200 rows. So which will actually give this table where you can insert the row. So employee name say okay, and then gender say male. Okay. So like this you can okay. It says the data is not yet committed. So let's tab it so it will resolve. Okay, and then let's enter something. Okay, and click on enter, so which will actually insert the row into the table. So fine, now we will see how to add some column, missed column into the table again. So right click on the table and click on the table which will actually sorry click on the design. Okay, so which will actually give this existing table. And while adding a row, make sure that you have to allow the nulls. Suppose say if I want to add an field saying email, okay, email and then of type varchar, or it can be of in varchar, right? In varchar, okay. And if I uncheck this call, allow null, and if I try to save it, it will not be able to save the record. So that is the reason. See, okay, so that is the reason you have to make sure that you have checked this null and now save it. It will definitely work. Okay, so now might be we can try to uh, select the tables whatever we have in this table. So let's try to select star from emp. Okay, so which will give the result of what all the columns, what all the records we have in this particular table. So this is what we inserted, right? So email just now we created, and it is a nullable column. That is the reason it has inserted null. Okay, so finally if you want to delete this column, or sorry, this table, you have to right click on this. Okay, and then hit on delete, so which will ask you to give a dialog box where you can just select yes, so which will delete the table. And let's try to understand how to create this through query. Okay, so let's try to create, and let's see how we can create. So first we have to write create table, and the syntax goes in this way: create table, table name, and then you have to mention the columns. So suppose now I'm telling the system that create a table with the name employee. Okay, and then open the brackets. Let's say again employee id is what we want to create. So employee id is of type int, and we will enforce this as a primary key column. So enter primary key and make sure that you are giving comma here, and then employee name, which is of type varchar, right? So let's say 30 or 40. Okay, and then next is let's give gender, okay, which is of type varchar. Okay, so now let's try to execute this query. Command completed successfully. So now let's see whether the table got created. Yeah, table has got created. Let's refresh this to see. Yeah, you can see it, right? So employee table has been created with all these columns: employee id, which is a primary key, and then other two columns, right? So fine, we will try to insert a record to this particular row. So before inserting, let's try to alter this table. So how to alter a table then? The syntax is alter table, and then specify the table name, say employee. And suppose if you want to add a row, then you have to, sorry, add a column, then you have to specify add. If you want to modify that particular column, say you have to modify, then specify modify. If you want to delete, then say drop. Okay, okay, fine. So let's add a row then, sorry, let's add a column then. Add, let's add email, and it is of type varchar, or you can give in varchar 2, okay, of 20. Now let's execute this query. Yeah, command completed successfully. Let's refresh this. Yeah, you can see this, which is of type varchar. Email has been added. Okay, now let's try to insert the record. In that case, the syntax is insert into employee is the table, right? So employee, and then you have to say values. So under values, you have to specify, suppose if it is an employee id, then you have to give the employee id here. Say 01 is the employee id, and then name is of say something. Okay, and then next specify the gender, female, sorry, it's female. Okay, and then something with email. Let's try to give gmail.com. Okay, okay, let's execute this. See, you are able to see that a row has been inserted into this table. So let's try to select, and we can see that record here. Okay, now if you want to delete this record, so then there are two ways in the sense, if you want to delete all the values whichever is present in this table, then you can just give delete from table name. Okay, delete from employee, which will actually delete all the things present in the table. So before that, let's try to understand this by inserting couple of other records. Okay, so let's insert something like two, and then some name, and then let's try to insert another record. Okay, So you see that there are three records present in the table now. Suppose if I want to delete one of the row, so you can just specify it through uh, you know employee ID, which is a primary key. So say that delete from employee. Okay, this is the table, and specify the where clause. Specifying the where clause will delete that particular record only. So employee ID is the column which is equal to 1. So if you execute this query, now it will delete only the one record with 01 as an employee ID, and these two are present. Suppose if I want to delete all of them together, in that case remove this where clause and then execute this query. Delete from, okay, sorry, okay, so delete from employee, so which will delete all the rows present in the column. Okay, so let's try to insert this and try to update one of the records. Suppose if we want to update one of the records, say you don't want this to be female, let's try to change this value to male. So let's update employee. Okay, so this is the syntax to update the table name and then set. Okay, set which value we want to set. So we are supposed to set the gender. Set gender is equal to male for the employee who is having the id 2. So to say that, we have to specify the where clause, where employee id, which is this, is equal to 02. So just execute this, which will update the, exactly, this is what we did. Suppose if I select now, you can see that now this has been updated to male. Okay, fine. So we saw how to update a record, and then how to insert a record and delete a record. So now we also have seen that how to alter a table, correct? So now let's try to drop the table. So the syntax is drop table employee, which is the table name, correct? So drop table employee. Let's execute this. So which will drop the table itself. So now if I try to select that, it says that there is no table present with that name. So you can see that invalid object name. Just try to refresh this and you can see that the table got removed as well. So this is on how to create a table, how to insert the record, and how to delete the record. So thank you for watching.